Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Paty Garza, and this is Hello Precarity COVID-FML Edition. I want to thank the Brown Arts Initiative and Sydney Skybetter for making this opportunity possible. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Noreen Major, the Chief Development Officer at the American Repertory Theater. The American Repertory Theater, or ART, at Harvard University is a leading force in the American theater, producing groundbreaking work that is driven by risk-taking, artistic inquiry, and passionate inquiry. Recent productions include Jagged Little Pill, Rachel Chafkin and Dave Malloy's Moby Dick, and Six the Musical. Noreen has been the fearless leader of the development office at ART since 2017. Noreen, thank you so much for chatting with us today.
Oh, of course. I'd do anything for you, Paty. Come on.
I had the pleasure of interning at ART this past year, and it was a wonderful experience with Noreen in development.
Yeah, you are missed.
So, to start things out, just how are you doing? How is the development office at ART doing in the context of this whole wacky world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I think about this a lot lately. In Waitress, one of the characters is actually, "Are you happy?" and sort of pauses and says, "Happy enough." And that's kind of how I feel like, we're okay enough. We were a tight-knit group before this happened. You have been a part of our team, and you know that we're very lucky as we navigate the situation. We have good and bad days, all of us, but we really do have each other's backs. And so that goes a long way when we know when we need to sort of hold each other up and when to push each other. And we've always been busy, but now it's like there's like a new level of urgency and busy. This pandemic has definitely created a lot of challenges and opportunities that's kept us quite focused.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you guys are happy enough.
Happy enough.
And I guess now, how is ART in general doing in the context of the pandemic? What have you guys been up to? What's been going on?
Well, I mean, I think you said it kind of briefly in your intro, which is very kind, and thank you. We, as an institution, are always focused on our mission to expand the boundaries of theater, and certainly passionate inquiry is one of them. We have a unique relationship with Harvard University, which affords us opportunities not only to pursue research and inquiry, but also to network in a variety of ways with our local and national peers. And in the early days of COVID, our costume shop, like many, many others, was trying to make masks to help. And our artistic director wanted to be sure that we were communicating correctly around the masks. And so she reached out to Joe Allen, and he's the associate professor of exposure assessment science. He's also the director of the Healthy Buildings program at the Chan School here at Harvard University, and said, Joe, here's what our costume shop is doing. How do we message this? And Joe had already been part of a think tank the prior summer about our new building. We have a new building project in Alston. And so, interestingly, that conversation evolved into, a collaboration that we currently find ourselves in with the Chan School. So that was probably the most immediate thing that we all focused on.
Wow. And actually, that's a great segue into my next question. ART just announced a partnership with the Chan School of Public Health to develop a roadmap. Can you tell us a bit more about this project?
Yeah. So we're really, really excited about this collaboration, and I feel very grateful to be at the ART right now while this work is happening. The thinking was sort of, how do we use science, or in this case, more of like translational science.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we take what is being learned to develop principles and general guidance to help theater return safely? You know, there was this, one of the early conversations, of course, when things started to close, and there were questions, you know, there's questions globally about economy. And, you know, the arts are an important part of most economies, and certainly here in Greater Boston. And so part of the thinking in this collaboration, which I should mention is a task force, which is developed and led by Joe Allen and the Healthy Building staff at the Chan School, is to have a living document. It'll live on the ART's website. It'll be updated regularly. We know that this isn't a linear process. You know, science progresses, and then we learn, and then the ART's working continues, our thinking develops, and we're trying to kind of remain nimble. Mm-hmm. But we're hoping to address rehearsal and performance, audience interaction, looking at ticketing, front of house, concessions, restrooms, back of house. We're really trying to be thoughtful about the overall healthy building strategy. And then what we learn, our sort of, the ART will serve as a sort of case study. Right. And the plan is to work with the Healthy Buildings team in the Chan School. And as we learn, we will share it more broadly on the website.
That's wonderful.
That's our thinking today.
That's very exciting. It changes every day.
It does. Yeah.
It's very exciting to hear, and definitely something that will pave the way forward for theater in the United States and everywhere, I think. That's very exciting.
I agree. Yeah.
How has this partnership is phenomenal, but how has the theater remained active and engaged its audience and donor base through digital initiatives, or obviously the season got canceled, so what happens now?
Right. Well, we were fortunate in that we were able to postpone. So we were able to postpone a portion of our season, and so we were also very quick to pivot. In the development office, we looked very, very quickly and early on at our membership benefits and those moments that our audiences may have come together. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to plan digital events around that time. So, you know, an example of that is we did a conversation with Professor Stephen Greenblatt and Ramy Targoff and Whitney White, who Whitney's piece Macbeth in Stride was set to open at Oberon. And we did a conversation with looking at Shakespeare, looking at the fact that, you know, Macbeth was allegedly written, you know, during the Black Plague and quarantine. And here is Whitney White with her piece Macbeth in Stride that has been postponed due to a pandemic. So they talked a little bit about that. They also talked about the ambition of Lady Macbeth. So we tried to kind of honor that moment. Another example I can give you just really quickly is the Tony Awards being, you know, they're not happening in June. And so you know this, but others, why would they need to know this, that Sean on our staff he remembers Tony Award statistics and details like one might remember sports stats.
Yeah.
And so we had a whole conversation about, you know, how do we mark if you're an 8th grader and your spring musical has been canceled, to our, our own ART community and others that were hoping to watch or participate in the Tony Awards. So we set up this event, The Show Must Go Sean, which is Sean hosting a trivia around the Tony Awards, and we're going to invite anyone who would like to kind of tune in and test their knowledge. And so we tried to do some special things like that, and also some really focused. We have a whole salon series around 1776, which of course has been postponed, and we've been fortunate to be able to work with Harvard scholars on a salon series around that. And so we were able to move a few of those to a digital platform, including with David Moss from Harvard Business School, Professor David Moss, I should say, Harvard Business School, and Professor Annette Gordon-Reed, both, exceptional thinkers and experts, and being able to still offer that has been hugely helpful in terms of engaging our audiences and our partners and our educators and students, and it's been really fabulous.
That's wonderful to hear, and definitely pushing the boundaries of theater one way or another in this digital age.
Right?
I'm excited about Sean's trivia night. That sounds very fun and community engaging.
Yes, tell your friends. Brown University squad on the trivia.
I'm sure our audience would be happy to partake.
Oh my God.
So now I'm pivoting a bit more towards development-specific questions at ART. Development is very important right now, both not just in theater, but any organization trying to get funds, and like nonprofits trying to keep afloat. So I would just love to hear a bit more about how ART is dealing with this, starting with, and we've seen across the board events such as the gala, like fundraising gala, not just at ART but everywhere, being postponed, and these are essential for not to keep our donors engaged and active and to get money into the theater. So how have these changes and like the restrictions from COVID-19 impacted the theater and the development operations?
It's a tough question. So our gala event was set for the end of March. And of course, all of the sort of decisions about gatherings and things that was happening, moment to moment, and really a Thursday morning looked very different from a Monday morning. And so we made the decision to postpone that event March 11th. So when you think about how much fundraising had been done up to that point, it's not an insignificant amount of revenue for our organization. It accounts for, over $1 million. And this event was on track to break all of the previous records. And so it was the kind of thing where we kind of had to be really mindful to just accept the terms, right? Because there's actually nothing that any of us can do. And we worked with our auditors, and actually another arts organization, not in our particular discipline, who also had their big fundraiser planned. They were a little bit later than us, but we worked together to contact or to craft language, our auditors and the CFO of another organization, to craft language and communicate with our supporters to see if there might be a way to release the restrictions around those gifts, so that it could remain in our current fiscal year fundraising total. We were very, very fortunate that a lot of folks really understood that certain things were beyond our control, and we didn't not deliver an event by our own choosing, and that it would be postponed. And we're also very, very fortunate, I have to say, to have vendors that also understood and allowed us to move things forward. So we actually moved everything forward a year. And we also understand, just like I said earlier, that we may need to readjust and it may need to be moved later. We just know that until it's safely, we can safely convene groups that size. You remember our event is over 500 people.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be our first focus, is making sure that we can do it safely. And so when it happens, it will happen. And that's kind of where we are right now. And it's just constantly changing. And I actually, if I'm being honest, I just really want to properly celebrate our honoree, if I'm being honest, because we pick one person to give an Angel Award to every year that has had an impact on our organization. And I'm really hopeful to have that live and to have a group come together to celebrate our honoree. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a wonderful community. So hopefully we'll see what happens a year from now. But meanwhile, while we live in the digital world, are there any new development initiatives ART is doing with digitally or like with the COVID-19 constraints?
So again, we pretty quickly, I am every day grateful for the staff at the American Repertory Theater. And of course, I am partial to the development staff. And very early on, we looked at our membership models. And so we extended any new memberships coming in another 6 months. And we changed what would have been certain upgrades, things that would have shifted in the membership and the benefits model. Mm-hmm. We put a pause on those and really focused on when can we safely convene, and until we can, how can we engage digitally? And if you so choose to support our organization, we will make a commitment to be flexible to the start date of your membership until it can actually be activated.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of our members, they seem to have appreciated the flexibility. And we also understand that these are times in which people will reflect, and there is a lot of urgent need right now. And so we've just been really open in communicating that we know that there's pressing needs, and that folks can make a lot of choices with what they support philanthropically. And we also truly believe that the arts are how civilizations heal. Mm-hmm. And we want to be ready. We want to be ready when we come out of this prepared to respond to the storytellers and the artists that are going to create. So we've been very clear in that messaging, and so far our audiences and our members have come along with us. Then outside of that, I think we started 2 series which have been really interesting to see. One of them was for our donors at a certain level that typically get some sort of patron seminar or a more kind of intimate conversation with 25 people or less. Mm-hmm. And so Ryan McKittrick, is on our artistic team and is also teaches at Harvard University. And when we travel, ART has this whole ART Travels program, and Ryan has come on quite a few of those trips, and we would volunteer to have breakfast with the folks on the trip to chat about whatever they might experience in that day. When we went to Japan, he talked about, no theater and kabuki. Other times it's been, let's discuss, Diane's work on Pippin. There's a lot of ways that we just lovingly called it Breakfast with Ryan. And it was such a hit that when this happened, we kind of, and it was Ryan's math. He said, you could probably get about 20 squares and a Zoom, and that's about the right size for a classroom. And we said, well, could you do Breakfast with Ryan? And he said, yes. He has a class that he teaches with Diane Paulus, sort of a making of a musical class. And so he actually is teaching that class to some of our members every week. They meet and they go through the same curriculum that he uses at Harvard. And it's been very, very popular and a wonderful way for that group to engage. So a lot of those folks know each other. Mm-hmm. And especially in this time, where we are isolated, it's nice to see some friends or some, new friends and have something in common and learning something new. And that's been really fantastic to see the response to that. And then of course, lunch with Lunsford, with Mark Lunsford, our artistic producer. It's another member of our artistic team. He meets with someone from our community every week, and he's had everyone from, he's met with Gavin Creel, and he's talked to Summer and Sean from Company One. And Tuesday, he's going to chat with Sophie, who's another member of our artistic team, and Diana O, who was, sort of our artist in residence last season. So and that's the kind of thing that's open to all. So we have these sort of tiered, highly specialized events, and then events that we really wanted to make open to any and everyone that might just like to pop in.
Yeah.
But trying to keep them at the same time, so that people could kind of get it into their muscle memory a little bit. It's been really great.
That's great. That's a great way to keep community and to have something to look forward to every week.
I agree.
And thank you for telling us a bit about the ART side of things, but can you tell us more about how the donors or members or just community members have been responding to these? Like, I know when I saw the Givingtuesday campaign, which was huge for a bunch of organizations, I got very excited to get a text from ART, just like, knowing that you guys were still doing initiatives, and that was very exciting, at least as a community member, but I would love to hear more of your thoughts.
That's great to hear, Givingtuesday now, right? It was the kind of thing where it was such a rapid response, and we had, I think, 2 weeks to put that campaign together. And we tried to set ourselves apart from other not-for-profits that we knew there was going to be an influx of messaging that day. And so we did a 12-hour online auction that had everything from a book signed by Gloria Steinem to our cast of Thumbelina telling, a bedtime story, telling Thumbelina the bedtime story, to a private Zoom with Diane Paulus. So we had all kinds of things in it, but it was a really, it wasn't a ton of items, but just a kind of wide expanse so that all could participate. And it actually accounted for more than a third of our income that day.
Wow.
And we acquired I think like over 40 new members that day.
That's wonderful.
And we set a goal of $50,000. We surpassed that goal. So when I look at it overall and think about how typically where do the arts fit into this country's giving, overall, it's very encouraging to get that kind of a response. and then, also we have gotten a lot of positive reactions to the Lunch with Lunsfords and the Salon series that we've been able to move to a digital platform. I mean, David Moss, it was a class, it's a whiteboard class on the federal negative, and he had not done it in that platform before, and we had 280 people.
Oh wow!
Sign up that showed up to the class, and so it's we're all learning, as we go, and so it was exciting though to see that much reaction to that, and to also know that people have been wonderfully patient with us as we learn Zoom and how do we stream it on YouTube versus this, that, and the other, and his Instagram Live, and there's all of these different ways in which you can try it. Typically, the feedback has been that people like that there's different styles to the different events that we have. David Moss being one where you read the case study in advance. They follow Socratic method, so it was sort of be prepared to be called upon to answer a question, versus Mark Lunsford hosting Lunch with Lunsford, where he's having a chat with, perhaps an artistic friend. And if you can log in, but you need to leave, we record them all and release them later, so you could come back and watch them when you're in a different sort of space. And it's been really rewarding, I think, to hear the feedback overall that the energy and the engagement are felt in the way that they're intended. The sort of desired outcome was that we felt like there was we being the development staff, and I do think the ART, there was like a rush of digital content from a lot of organizations, in the beginning of, we're streaming and we're showing, it was a lot of that happening straight away. And we were very deliberate to really focus in on, what do we do best, and what moments were we hoping to share, and how do we mark those and honor that time together. And it's been nice to see that it's been a highlight for a lot of our audience members, and it's actually been great to see the student response. In David Moss's class, there were, I think, 3 or 4 high school students.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's always nice to see.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great and heartwarming in these very weird times that we're going through.
I know.
And I guess this is going to be my final question in this section, and then we're moving on towards the end of the interview. But do you have any thoughts as to how we can get past this, both like as an industry, but more as individuals working in the arts or trying to like learn about the arts?
I'm not sure. I think there is this question, right, of how do we get, back to normal.
Right.
And I don't know what normal is going to be.
Yeah.
Is it when a vaccine exists? Is it when we really understand social distancing? When there is a vaccine, will behavioral patterns mimic those of a recession, where people will come less because they will be out of the habit? Because it's habitual to participate in the ritual of theater.
Right.
And so it's going to take investment to lure those audiences back. Our entire form is based on a crowded space.
Yeah.
On audiences sharing air.
Yeah.
Breathing as one, watching one experience that will only be that way, that time that you were all together. So, you know, it's also just, I'll speak about what I do. It's also hard to engage new members or to acquire new members when there's work they can't see, when its engagement looks so different. And, you know, on a good year, most organizations are seeing, you know, tens of percentages of loss in terms of new members. And statistically, if you lose an audience member for a year, you've lost them.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us are feeling that, you know, our challenge is really just to try to retain as much current as we can. And, you know, in terms of like, what would you say? I think it's also just to remember, just in terms of fundraising, but in terms of everything, we're not a random sector. You know, we are a part of an entire ecosystem, this sort of theatrical ecosystem. Mm. And I think there's also going to be questions of how we make work and who is that work for? Right. How ambitious is that work? And how needed is that voice? And then we can start having conversations about how we align resources, right, with all of that. But I think our institutions are going to look dramatically different. It's not just going to be a year or two. This is a long-term recovery. And I think we'll need to rethink entire entry points, yeah, during that time. Until it makes sense to go back to making work for live audiences again. And no one can say when that is. Yeah. So.
Wow. Thank you. Very insightful. I'm learning a lot.
Well, I actually haven't thought about any. It's interesting to be asked these questions and be like, how do I feel about that? I haven't been asked these questions before. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, moving on towards our just final portion of the interview, just some concluding questions, and this is both kind of me asking you, Noreen, as someone who I look up to in this super industry, and as a graduating senior, graduating into a very uncertain world, what advice do you have for yourself when you were at the precipice of graduating college?
Ooh. So some things that I have found helpful personally that I wish I had thought of more was the sort of importance of remembering who you are and how you feel in this moment and why you devoted the time to study this form. I always think about the sense of like the idea of like a mantra being an actual like mind protector. So along the road, I've sort of acquired things that I will say to myself to kind of keep myself going. And I had this is so funny that I'm even thinking about this right now. I had a teacher, a creative writing teacher in high school. His name is Doug Jones. Found him on Facebook recently, miracles of social media. And he always used to say, think long, think wrong. It was always how he described creative writing. And it is that, saying that to myself throughout the years at different times, saying things like, you know, you've heard me say this, where I say hope is not a strategy. You always have hope, but it cannot be the plan. I wish I had had some of that when I had first graduated. It's very difficult when you enter into any workforce, and when you are a natural leader with a clear voice, like I'm sure, I mean, I know you are, so I believe that, you know, your fellow graduates are in a similar headspace. And when you are confronted with systems and institutions, it's tricky. It's tricky to navigate. And I wish I had early on learned to, you know, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? You know, these things that I've learned that I say to myself now, it separates sense from nonsense. You know, I have that sign in my office, separate sense from nonsense. It's like, start to think about, you know, where you can find power, you know? And also, I will say a thing I learned this quickly, but I wish I had known it on my graduation day. I largely learned about the kind of manager I wanted to be from the types of managers I had that were not the kind of managers that I wanted to be. And I think one of the most important things that I learned is that when you acquire power, and everybody has power, you need to share it, and you need to share it when you're behind closed doors and nobody can see you. And that is a desperately important thing that I wish I had learned, because I think I graduated and got into the workforce and was just so grateful to have a job, you know, and I wish I had applied some of the power that I had more quickly. Also, save for retirement. That is another thing I will say. I did not do that, and I wish I had. That is just a practical thing.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm taking all of those to heart. Thank you. Taking those with me. And finally, just any last words of advice or thoughts for theater makers seeking to survive and just build community through these trying times?
You know, I will say, and I think I said this to you the last time we spoke, that one of the first things that I did, so I had my degree, I actually, you know, I have a degree in performance. I also studied theater history, and I had a minor in religion. One of the first things that I did was go back to my theater history books and start reading about creation following the time of plague. And one of the things that I was reminded of is that, you know, plagues radically reshape and have done it to the human world more than once. There is real hope in that survival. There is absolute brutality, and there is absolute beauty. And that the one thing that we know is that plague legacies survive. And you are all a part of this moment in time. And I think that, you know, I think we all need to press ahead with sensitivity. We all need to understand this. We're going to need to reassess constantly. We all know that there could be a pending depression, and what a daunting time to graduate and head into the workforce. But I think what we do is needed. It's needed to drive public health, to drive healing. And I think just from a practical standpoint, if we're talking about, you know, things that you would need to survive in your community, I'd say the number one thing that I that I am dismayed at when I see it in people that come out of school, is the lack of understanding for our business model, and the number of people that I see that work in not-for-profits and don't know how to read a 990, that don't understand the function of each department, especially the board, if you work at a place where the board has fiduciary responsibility. I think it's our responsibility to understand those models. And, you know, too often I think it's folks tell themselves they're going to write some grants and, you know, they'll be off. It's just not always that way. So if my advice would be to have a plan. If you have a plan, know your budget.
Very important.
Have a sense of deliverable. And I will say that please, to anyone watching, if you work with a fundraiser ever, or a fundraising team, please never say, someone will want to pay for that, right? There's a grant for that, right? Please have a plan, have a budget, have a clear vision, know your deliverables. Why is it unique? Why is it urgent? And then yes, maybe someone will want to pay for it.
All very important things to know going into this world of arts and fundraising. Wow, well, on that note, Noreen, thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me today. It is phenomenal to hear how you and ART are just working and doing these wonderful things, and it's always lovely to see you and hear about Devo at ART. For Hello Precarity COVID-FML Edition, I'm Paty Garza. Thank you for listening.